Hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about protecting data in Excel. Now often when we work with Excel we work with sensitive data, and other times we work with Excel worksheets which we don't want other people changing, and in other instances we only want people inserting cells into input cells. Now we can highlight cells to let people know cells in input cell, but people don't always know that, so another way of protecting that is through data protection. So those are the three main uses of protecting data in Excel. Number one, protecting sensitive data like payroll information or P&Ls. Number two is making sure that people don't change a workbook, like adding rows and columns and things like that. And number three is making sure that people enter data for input fields in the correct area. So you can do this through protecting a sheet. So this is adding password protection to a sheet and controlling what users can or cannot do without a password. Now, to change your password settings, you want to go to the Review tab in Excel. Now, next to the Notes and Comments section is an area called Protect. And there's three different options that you can see. There's Protect Sheet, Protect Workbook, and Allow Edit Ranges. Now, the first thing that I want to talk to you about is Protect Sheet, which is the most common one that we're going to be using, because it relates to a certain area that we want to protect, for example, an input sheet. Alternatively, we may want to protect the entire workbook, and that's for more things that it prevents people from changing structural elements of the workbook. This means that anyone without a password cannot add tabs, delete tabs, and hide tabs, or unhide tabs as well. So that's a good way of preventing people from seeing hidden tabs, for example. So let's try that out right now. Let's put a password on here. Password is my password. Password makes you re-enter it twice. And then you can see now that the gray Protect Workbook button is selected. So if we try and hide it or unhide it, it won't let you do it. But if we do this and type in the password, and let's say we want to hide our sensitive data, let's say this is our sensitive data here, we can hide it and then just protect the workbook, and that saves us from having to go through the complicated steps of protecting certain sheets or edit ranges and things like that. This is a good way of doing it. Password. So now no one can unhide or see the sensitive data, so it's a good way of doing it. So the next thing that I want to show you is actually outside these options. It's putting a password protection on the entire workbook. So where we do that is in the options, and go back to file and go to info section over here. And over here, as you can see, one or more sheets in this workbook have been locked to prevent unwanted changes to the data. That's the change that we just made. And you can actually unprotect these if you have the password for that particular sheet. Now, the other thing that you can do is by selecting the Protect Workbook button, you can unprotect it like so, which is the same as pressing that button. But there's also another cool feature in there, which is to encrypt with a password. So let's add password to this workbook. Password. And what that means is anyone who wants to actually open the workbook then needs to insert a password. So let's just close out of this and try this, and I'll show you how it's going to look. Okay, I'm just opening up the file now again, and we're just waiting for it to load. Now this window have popped up and it says Excel cheat sheet is protected. Please type in the password to open the Excel workbook. So this is a good way of sending encrypted files to people. For example, you may want to protect sensitive data like customer information, and if anyone else if they got their hands on it, you don't want them to actually open it and see the data. It's also good for transactions, large deals like that, when you're dealing with confidential information. Perhaps you don't know if someone else in your organization can access the file on your server. It's probably best practice to password protect your files. And now when we type in the password, we can open up the Excel workbook. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly remove that because I don't want that password protection on my file going forward. So I'm going to go File, Info, and then just press this again. It's going to ask you to enter the password again, and we should be good to go. Now, some of the other cool things that you can do in here is, obviously there's the protect current sheet and protect workbook structure, which we could have accessed from within the Excel workbook, but you've also got these extra features. So number one is always open read only. So that's going to actually, it's going to force people to opt into editing. Another one is actually to restrict access, and it's going to actually, you specify certain individuals on your workplace server who can actually access the file and edit, copy and print, and you can restrict certain people as well. Now you've also got this mark as final button down the bottom. Okay, so now options are popping up, so you can say highly confidential all employees, confidential all employees. You can have unrestricted access, which is default, or you can have restricted access, which is we actually specify who gets access to that particular file. That's really a next level of security you can add. And then there's this mark as final, which is really just a prompt to let people know that the document is final, just as so they don't accidentally make a change to a final document. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you is the just protecting a single sheet. So if we go back to where we were in the review tab, we can press protect sheet. Now within this, it will give you options. Just zoom in on this so you can see it a little bit better. Options of what the user can and cannot do on this particular sheet. For example, we can allow them to select a locked cell, or we can untick that and they won't even be able to select it. They'll just get an error by trying to press on it. They'll be able to select unlock cells, format columns, insert columns, insert rows. So as soon as the sheet's protected, no one can add a column or row unless you actually tick one of these boxes. So that's a good way of actually making sure your worksheets are consistent. And in the last video when we talked about data consolidation, we learned how important it is that our worksheets are consistent. So perhaps one way of you doing this is by protecting those sheets and preventing people from actually inserting columns and rows and so forth when you hand it out. Okay, so let's just add in a password protection. So we go password again. Don't actually use password as your password, by the way. And now you can see as soon as I try and type something into any cell, what it's saying is the cell or cell chart you're trying to is on a protected sheet. To make a change, you must unprotect the sheet. So you have to go up the top and press unprotect sheet, type in password, and now you can edit cells, highlight them, format them, add in rows and so forth, which you wouldn't be able to do if it was not protected. Now what if you want people to only edit certain cells, right? So let's say we've got these input cells over here, or maybe you only want them to be able to edit this particular cell here because that's your input cell. Okay, so let's say that we can only edit these cells and this cell here. Everything else I want locked because it's got formulas. I just don't want them touching it. Okay, so we can actually do that, but first we have to actually change the setting before we protect the sheet. And the way we do that is we actually select the cells that we want to allow access to. We're going to right click them and go to format cells. Now we're going to go to the protection subheading over here and see this button over here, locked. So by default all of the cells are locked. So if I select all of these cells, go format, you can see it's locked by default. And what that means is as soon as you press protect sheet, those cells will be locked. So what we want to do for those input cells is actually unlock them here. We want to make sure their format is not locked. So I'm going to tick that, press OK. So let's just quickly test one of these cells again. So you can see that it's not locked. And let's test the cell next to it. And we can see that it's locked. Okay, perfect. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to protect the sheet, select lock cells. So what we're saying is we've differentiated between an unlocked cell and a locked cell. So these are the unlocked cells and these are the locked cells. So if we add a password in here, and these are by default ticked, let's see what happens. Okay, can I edit this cell? Nope, I cannot. Can I edit this cell? Yes, I can, because it's an input cell and we've unlocked it. So I can type in a number there and so forth. what you can do on top of that, let's say that we only want numbers in this one and we only want text in these ones, to avoid someone accidentally going, a percentage of 900% or something by accident and screw up your formula. So we can actually combine this with data validation. So we can go in here, data. Oh, let's just unprotect the sheet quickly. Okay, so I've removed the protection from the sheet so we can edit it again. Let's just quickly add in a data validation into those cells. Okay, so what data validation is it only allows you to input a certain value into those cells. It's also how we often do lists, so drop down lists. And a list is basically, you only have so many options that you can choose from that list, so therefore it's a data validation. But you can also do it so that we can only insert, say, a whole number or a decimal number. So we want a whole number because it's a full currency. We can also specify, a minimum or a maximum or a between or less than, and so forth. So this is what we want, and we could ignore a blank, or you're allowed to insert a blank. Let's just put 0 to 10,000. So now I can type in a number. Oh, sorry, that's bigger than the maximum. I can type in a number of 100. That should work, but I can't type a text. See, it doesn't work. I can't type a negative number. Can't have a negative currency. But you can type 50. So there's how you can combine a password protection and a data validation to create a comprehensive input page into your Excel workbook. So that's everything that you need to know about password protection in your Excel workbook.